In Quito, Ecuador. This is From the South. I'm Emeka Omoli. We start in Brazil, where the Workers' Party has registered former President Luiz Inacio Lula da Silva as its presidential candidate. But Lula's bid is in the hands of the Supreme Electoral Court, which has to allow him to run from prison. The former president is currently serving a 12-year sentence for corruption charges. More than 10,000 supporters have rallied outside the Supreme Electoral Court in Brasilia.
Arriving here and having this document in our hands is an immense victory. It's not our victory. It's not a victory for the Workers' Party, for Lula. It's a victory for the Brazilian people. It's a victory for those who have believed in social justice, for those who have believed in a better Brazil.
Our correspondent, Mia Alberti, has more.
A river of support for Lula. Thousands of followers of the former president marched to Brasilia on Wednesday to witness his registration as the official presidential candidate for the Workers' Party. Some of them even walked for days, marching for the candidate, whom they believe will restore stability in Brazil.
We came here to go to the court to register Lula's candidacy, and we're not leaving until that is done.
We have the hope and certainty that only Lula will be able to lead the Brazilian people to be victorious in the elections, to take possession of the presidency and to reorganize Brazil, starting in 2019.
Lula da Silva is still serving a 12-year jail sentence in Curitiba, so it was up to his vice-presidential pick, Fernando Haddad, to take lead as he confirmed Lula's official registration.
I am certain that this gesture expresses the wishes of millions of Brazilians who want to bring Lula back to the Planalto Palace. He represents the hopes, dreams, and wishes for a better future, and has all the attributes to lead Brazil out of this crisis that was imposed on us.
On the streets and online, the hashtag Lula is candidate was trending on Twitter all day. Lula is by far the most popular candidate, according to the latest polls, but the real fight starts now. The Electoral Court is expected to reject Lula's registration as a presidential candidate. The known as Ficha Limpa law says persons sentenced after an appeal cannot run for presidency. And the newly elected president of the Electoral Court, Rosa Weber, has been a hard defender of that law. Lula's lawyers are expected to continue to appeal on his sentence until the last minute. If they manage to do so until September 17th, Lula's face and name will be on the ballot, but the real candidate will be Fernando Haddad. Only one question remains: will Lula be allowed to run? Well, it's unlikely that the Electoral Court will allow it, so Lula's best chance is to be acquitted of all of his crimes. Time is against him, but if he managed to do that before the elections, what we saw today, all of the support and the polls suggest that he will be again the president of Brazil. Mia Alberti, Telesur, in São Paulo.
Not enough senators showed up for the vote on the police probe against former Argentine President Cristina Fernández de Kirchner. A vote would have approved a search of her properties as part of the corruption investigation. Less than 37 senators showed up to the chamber. The former president is dogged by corruption allegations during her term. She has acknowledged that there was likely corruption during her government, but denies personal involvement.
We believe the raid is a type of test that doesn't define the degree of responsibility, but is a task from the judge which cannot be halted as part of the investigation, which is part of pre-trial. We have maintained in the judgment that we support. We have maintained that it should be done with prudence, as we are talking about a national senator who is carrying out her term and who is also a former president.
More on the failed parliamentary session now from our reporter in Buenos Aires, Sabrina Roth.
The session in the Senate to authorize the House raids of Senator Cristina Fernández de Kirchner was suspended. Only 35 senators arrived out of the 37 needed to start the debate. The session was suspended for the next week. On Monday, Fernández de Kirchner appeared in court to testify on a corruption case. Although the senator decided not to answer any questions and handed over a statement, there she asked the case to be annulled and also that it be handled by Judge Hernan Arcolini. Later that same day, the senator's apartment building was raided. Nothing was found. Fernández de Kirchner said this is a move to cover up the Argentinian economic crisis.
That was Sabrina Roth reporting there. Staying in Argentina, the Supreme Court has overturned Milagros Sala's prison transfer. The court ruled that the social leader and member of the Mercosur parliament should be returned to house arrest. She was sent to a federal prison last week where she began a hunger strike. The accusations against Sala include fraud and extortion. She was detained for allegedly instigating violence during a protest she says she didn't attend in early 2016. Thousands of supporters of Nicaraguan President Daniel Ortega have been marching in the capital, Managua. Waving flags, they rallied to defend the government. The Central American country is in the grip of a political crisis, which has gone on for 4 months. Ortega's supporters accuse his critics of being part of a foreign-backed coup to unseat him. They say they are terrorists among the opposition.
We are always fighting on our feet for our blessed democracy. 11 years ago, democracy triumphed here, and we as Sandinistas, as the son of Sandino, as a brother of Daniel Ortega, we are obliged to be out on the street, to look after our country, to look after our brother. Look at this march and you will find no violence. You will find love, tenderness, a family. This is what we Nicaraguan brothers and sisters need.
Meanwhile, thousands also came out in Managua to demand Ortega step down. Waving the national flag, crowds called for people arrested during the anti-government demonstrations to be freed. The Nicaraguan Center for Human Rights says some 500 people have been jailed and 180 have been put on trial for alleged terrorism. At least 265 people have been killed in Nicaragua since the beginning of the crisis. We'll take a short break now, a look at what our multimedia colleagues are reporting.
We are looking to expand partnerships where it's mutually beneficial, no hesitation at all. We see Latin America as a neighbor. Some people say we don't pay much attention to it. That certainly is not the case in the military.
Welcome back. US Defense Secretary James Mattis is in Chile for the third leg of his South American tour. Mattis is due to meet Chilean President Sebastián Piñera in a visit aimed at discussing defense and trade agreements. Analysts say he is hoping to challenge China's increasing influence in the region. The case of a teenage Chilean boy allegedly abused by the police has exposed a worrying trend against students.
Only 4 blocks separate Eduardo de la Barra School and the police station in the city of Valparaíso. And Vicente has to walk past it each day despite being the victim of alleged police brutality on the premises. He claims he was illegally detained for taking a traffic sign in front of the headquarters.
He told me that I'm in problem. He took me by the arm and took me to the commissary.
The joke lasted only a couple of seconds, but it made the policeman angry, especially one.
He pushes me. I fell for approximately 3 steps or 4, and there he begins to hit me for the first time. He kicked me while I was on the ground. After that, he raised me and started to hit me with his open hands, in the ears, in the head, in the body. But there is more to it. Vicente studied for over a month in the emblematic school, known for student demonstrations, and also known for its alumni, President Salvador Allende. They let me know in the commissary. They told me that they have to educate those of Eduardo de la Barra, that they are communists and lost causes. And in the school, there are many cases of violence in the same commissary. In March, during the presidential inauguration ceremony, Vicente's schoolmate took a path outside of which the policeman outlined.
And that meant that they hit him, tortured him, threatened him. 5 or 4 policemen, so we are in the process of filing lawsuits. There
is also a classmate that was detained in this commissary and beaten when she was pregnant. Police always go unpunished. The young man says he spent a night in the headquarters being beaten.
The legal hair report indicates that the hits received by the minor in the right ear is known as a torture mechanism called the telephone, which causes great damage but are not visible.
Vicente suffered a perforated eardrum. His classmates share his emotional pain and anger.
At 17 years of age, there's an interest in political participation, and that doesn't bode well with the institutions that are meant to protect citizens but turn violent, especially against someone underage.
They say this seems to be a regular pattern against these school students.
Let's return to Argentina, where industry is suffering after recommendations by the International Monetary Fund. More in this report.
The industrial sector has recorded a year-on-year decrease reaching 8.1%. That's according to the latest data published by the National Institute of Statistics and Census. This is the worst collapse in the industrial sector since 2002, affecting the job market.
We've lost more than 100 high-salary jobs. Activities in the industrial sector reduced in 20%. Operations have systematically been suspended for several days this year, and then we see companies close. The increase of imported goods has worsened this crisis.
The cut on revenues due to inflation, the strong fiscal adjustment recommended by the International Monetary Fund, and the rise of tariffs have impacted the domestic market with sales that have drastically reduced.
We must stop these policies to the line of regional integration in order to work with Brazil and with other brother countries in the region. We have to limit imports and create an investment bank that allows the development of small and medium-sized companies. We also have to strengthen some strategic areas of the big industry to push for a better quality employment.
Economists say there is no easy solution to the crisis.
We need to tackle structural problems and also turning around several of the policies that we have now. We need the economy to grow, but to grow oriented towards the domestic market. Workers need to have purchasing power. We also need a profound policy that promotes the growth of the industrial sector.
Meanwhile, the International Monetary Fund has audited the country's accounts and demanded that the government implement the adjustment policies, which will have a negative impact on the domestic market and local production.
Several social organizations in Ecuador have protested against new economic measures. The government announced a possible hike in fuel prices and tax exemptions for big companies.
The Confederation of the People and Social and Campesino organizations in Ecuador are very vocal about their views regarding the new measures taken by the Moreno administration, especially as it relates to rising fuel prices.
We have learned that the government is analyzing a possible hike in fuel prices. This would affect the people and the price of basic foodstuffs. That is why we reject these measures that have been proposed to the government by the International Monetary Fund.
The Confederation is also worried about the agricultural sector, especially for the legalization of lands handed over to campesinos during the last government. Their members said there might be some legal loopholes that could take their lands away after they were taken away from corrupt bankers during the crisis of '99.
We want to call to all 21 organizations that received these lands in 2011 to fight together. We will not allow them to be returned to the bankers.
These concerns have affected other sectors as well. In a public statement, workers from the electricity company have denounced a possible privatization of this utility. They have said to also support the fight of the campesinos.
We want to stand in solidarity with the campesino organizations. We want the government to act in favor of the campesinos.
Several protesters have already taken to the streets in the south of the country. Fishermen closed down roads to reject the new possible measures announced by the government. They demand President Moreno to meet their demands.
LGBTI activists in Uruguay have rejected an attempt to modify the trans bill. The bill is aimed at offering protection for trans people, including measures to guarantee their integration in education, work and economic rights. The law project also touches on trans kids and their recognition. A campaign was launched by the conservative movements to prevent the bill being passed in the Senate. Mario Abdo Benitez has taken the oath of office to become the new president of Paraguay in a ceremony in Asunción. Our correspondent Osvaldo Zayas has the details.
Mario Abdo Benitez has been sworn in as president. His father was the secretary of dictator Alberto Stroessner for over 30 years. Benitez comes from the Colorado Party, which is also the party of former president Horacio Cartes. The presidential inauguration ceremony took place during protests where social movements marched across the capital city, demanding to keep the nation's sovereignty safe after an agreement between Paraguay and the government of Mauricio Macri was signed. Abdo Benitez, who has been linked with political figures from the Stroessner dictatorship, takes power at the same time protests have been prohibited. Social activists announced more mobilizations to fight for their social and political rights, obtained just 30 years ago at the end of the dictatorship in 1989.
That's Osvaldo Zayas reporting there. Horacio Cartes, the tobacco businessman, leaves office as the president. He came to power by promising to reduce poverty. According to official data, he did not achieve it.
This neighborhood is located at the shore of the municipal dump known as Cateura, just in the capital of Paraguay. Nearly 6,000 families survive thanks to recycling. Roque belongs to one of them. He makes his living this way. He affirms that it's his best choice due to the lack of employment.
To me, it's more convenient to do this than getting a job with the minimum wage, for example, because you are your own boss. You decide what time you leave, at what time you enter, because you're going to work all day to earn money. How much? To earn a minimum wage. And sometimes, if you're lucky, you double that in a day.
Official data reveals that Paraguay has the highest unemployment rate of the last 12 years. Also, almost 2 of the 7 million inhabitants live in poverty. For Roque, the years of Cartes' government have not improved the quality of life.
Sincerely, it didn't change anything, and we don't know if with this new government it will change. It may be the same thing, can change or not, we don't know. Things are very difficult, because if we're going to talk about employment, even with a lot of experience, they don't hire you.
For Silva and his family, their struggle is the reality of many people from the neighborhoods located near the Paraguayan River. Silva hopes to return soon to his home that was almost left inhabitable after the last flood.
I work in a company that is over Felix Bogado Avenue, and my wife is a recycler.
He and his wife wish that the labor conditions improve. In a country where, according to the United Nations, 80% of employed people work off the books, without a fixed income or social security.
It can be done. Hopefully the salary is raised legally, but it's like a chain. If they raise the wages, they also raise the cost of living.
Cortés became president with the promise of reducing poverty, and he failed. He's now succeeded by Mario Abdo Benítez, a politician linked to the military dictatorship that proposes economic policies almost identical to those of his predecessor.
A group of Mexican women are distributing food and water to migrants trying to reach the United States. Known as Las Patronas, the 12 women wait for the train taking migrants through the country every night. Migrants hang precariously from the sides to grab the sacks held out to them. Some jump off and run along the tracks and then hop back on. During their dangerous journey, they risk crippling injuries. They also face attacks from criminals. And still in Mexico, hundreds of people dressed as jaguars claimed to the Virgin for the year of rain and good harvests. The festival takes place every August 15th in the state of Guerrero, where a mix of color, music and religion is combined for this particular ritual. The roots of this tradition are linked to the Mesoamerican mythology to invoke Mother Earth's powers to bring fertility and abundance. We'll take a short break now. Join us again after this look at what our multimedia colleagues are reporting. Welcome back. Malian President Ibrahim Boubacar Keïta has won a second term with 67% of the vote in a runoff election against Soumaïla Cissé. Although the Ministry of Territorial Administration confirmed the result on Thursday, it still has to be validated by the Constitutional Court. Cissé has previously said he will reject the vote due to alleged fraud. The elections were smeared by militant violence, which led to low turnouts. And now it's time to bring you other news from around the world.
Thousands gathered to watch Israeli and British flags burn during this year's bonfire in Northern Ireland's Bogside area of Derry. Poppy wreaths were also burnt. Bonfires on August the 15th have become customary in some parts of Northern Ireland to mark the Catholic Feast of Assumption. For others, they mark the introduction of imprisonment without trial of Republican suspects by the British in 1971. The bonfire has drawn criticism from a number of people, including the police service of Northern Ireland, who say it was a hate crime. An Afghan student killed in a bomb blast at an education centre by a suicide bomber has been buried. The bomber self-detonated during a class at the Morweed Academy, killing 34 students and wounding 56 others, according to the Health Ministry. The area is home to mainly Shia Hazara community who have been targeted by hardline Islamists in the past. The Taliban have denied responsibility. The British Union, Unite, has condemned the government's support for Bahrain, who are implicated in human rights violations against their own people. Ben Richards, international officer for Unite, spoke at the Workers' Trade Union of the Bahraini opposition on Wednesday, where he said the British government continue to provide military and security training to Bahrain, despite their attacks on peaceful protesters since 2011.
A trans woman has won the Democratic primary in the U.S. state of Vermont, moving a step closer to becoming the country's first transgender governor. Christine Hallquist became the first trans non-binary candidate from a major political party in the country's history, but she still faces an uphill battle in the general election. Hallquist will have to face Republican incumbent Phil Scott, who has been in office since 2016. And with that, we've come to the end of this news brief. These and many other stories, find them on our website, telesurtv.net/English. And go to social media, Facebook, Twitter and Instagram for Telesur English. I'm Emeka Omolu. Thank you for watching.
Our actions have an impact on the environment.